He was starving, half frozen, native, and lying on my land. The law said, walk away. The war said, let him die. But I didn't. I carried him home, and that one choice, it nearly got me killed, or saved an entire generation. You decide. The wind cut through the trees like a blade. Snowflakes danced in the air, swirling around the small wooden cabin that sat deep in the Montana wilderness. Inside, the fire had burned low, and the old man stirred. Harold Cole pulled on his thick coat, grabbed his rifle, and stepped outside. His beard was white like the snow, and his steps were slow but steady. He had lived alone for many years. The forest knew him, and he knew it in return. He walked toward the ridge, where his traps were set. It had been 3 days since he last caught anything. Winter was cruel this year. No rabbits, no deer, just cold silence. As he moved beneath the tall pines, something caught his eye near a frozen stream. At first, it looked like a pile of dark cloth, half covered in snow. But as he stepped closer, he froze. It was not cloth. It was a young man, barely more than a boy, lying still in the snow. Harold dropped to his knees. The boy's skin was dark, his black hair tangled and frozen. His face was thin, his lips cracked. He wore only a thin shirt and torn pants. No boots, no coat. His fingers were stiff with cold. Harold touched the boy's neck. There was a heartbeat, faint but there. The boy was alive. Lord have mercy, Harold whispered. He looked around the trees. This land had seen raids before. The Blackfeet were known to strike fast and vanish. Soldiers and settlers called them enemies. Helping one could be seen as treason. But Harold did not see an enemy. He saw a dying child. With effort, he lifted the boy into his arms. He was light as a sack of grain. Snow crunched beneath Harold's boots as he hurried back to the cabin. Each step made his legs ache. But he did not stop. Inside, he laid the boy near the fire, removed the wet clothes, and wrapped him in wool blankets. The boy's skin was ice cold. Harold took his last bottle of whiskey, poured a small cap, and touched it to the boy's lips. Then he added more wood to the fire and sat beside him. The boy trembled once, then lay still again. You better not die, kid, Harold muttered. Not after I carried your sorry hide all the way here. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, silence returned, broken only by the snap of burning wood and the quiet breath of a boy who had almost been lost to the snow. Harold leaned back in his chair, staring into the flames. He did not know who the boy was. He did not know what trouble might come. But in that moment, he made a choice. He would not let the boy die. The fire crackled softly, casting orange light on the cabin walls. Outside, snow fell quietly, covering the world in silence. Inside, Harold Cole sat near the hearth, watching the boy wrapped in blankets on the floor. He had changed the boy's clothes and dried his hair. He boiled water and soaked cloth to warm his hands and feet. It was slow work. The boy did not wake, but his breathing had grown stronger. Harold opened his cupboard. There was not much left. A jar of beans, a crust of bread, and one strip of dried venison. He stared at the meat, then at the boy. His stomach growled, but he reached for a knife and sliced the strip in half. He chewed his half slowly. The other piece he softened in warm water and placed it on a tin plate near the boy's mouth. The boy stirred. Harold leaned in. Can you hear me, kid? The boy's eyelids fluttered. His lips moved. No words came. Just a dry whisper like wind through leaves. Harold dipped a spoon in water and gently touched it to the boy's lips. The boy swallowed. That's it, Harold said, slow and steady. Minutes passed. The boy opened his eyes. They were dark, deep like river stones. He looked around, dazed. His gaze settled on Harold's face. He did not speak, but his eyes were wide with confusion and fear. You're safe, Harold said gently. You're not in the snow anymore. The boy tried to sit up, but winced in pain. Easy now. You've been half frozen. You need rest. The boy's lips moved again. This time, a word came out, so soft Harold almost missed it. Coda. Harold leaned closer. That your name? The boy nodded weakly. All right, Coda. I'm Harold. Harold Cole. Coda closed his eyes again, but there was peace on his face now. His breathing slowed. Harold sat back and watched him sleep. He felt something heavy in his chest. Not fear, not regret. Something else. Responsibility. He had brought this boy into his home. He had fed him. And now, whether he liked it or not, he was part of the boy's story. The wind pushed against the cabin walls. Harold added more wood to the fire and sat in silence. He had lived alone for many years. He had made peace with the loneliness. But now there was someone else breathing in this space. Someone who might bring danger. Or something more. Harold looked at the boy and shook his head slowly. "What have I done?" he whispered. But the answer would not come until morning. Morning came cold and gray. The fire had burned low, but the cabin was still warm. Coda slept quietly, his face no longer pale. Harold stepped outside, pulling his coat tight around him. The snow had stopped, but the wind was sharp. He walked toward the pine trees, hoping to check his snares again. Maybe luck had returned. As he reached the edge of the woods, something stopped him. Tracks. Not animal tracks. Boot prints. At least 3 sets. One of them was large, deep in the snow. The others were lighter, careful steps, moving around the edge of the clearing. Harold crouched down and examined the prints. They were fresh. From last night. While he was tending to Coda, someone had been watching the cabin. His heart beat faster. He followed the prints for a few feet. They led to the ridge behind the house, then disappeared in the thicker trees. Whoever had come near had not knocked. They had not called out. They had watched and left. Or maybe not. Harold turned slowly, eyes scanning the hills. And then he saw them. On the far ridge, near the treeline, 3 riders sat on horseback. They were too far to make out clearly, but their coats were dark blue, and one of them held a long rifle across his saddle. U.S. Cavalry. Harold's breath caught in his throat. He had seen enough soldiers in his time to know their look. These men were not out for a friendly visit. They were patrolling, searching, and he had a half-healed native boy asleep in his cabin. "Damn it," Harold muttered. He turned and hurried back to the house. Inside, Coda was awake, propped up on one elbow. His face was tired but alert. Harold closed the door behind him and bolted it. "We got trouble," he said. Coda watched him silently. "There were men watching the cabin last night. Soldiers. I just saw them again up on the ridge. They're looking for something. Or someone." Coda didn't speak, but the fear in his eyes said enough. "You were running from someone, weren't you?" Harold asked. Coda nodded once. "Are they after you?" Another slow nod. Harold rubbed his forehead. He felt like a man standing on thin ice. "I need to know. Boy, are they going to come back here?" Coda opened his mouth, but his voice was rough. "If they think. I am here, yes." Harold sighed. His cabin, his quiet life, his safety, all of it was now caught in something bigger. Something dangerous. He looked at Coda. "You should have died in that snow," he said softly. "But you didn't. So now we're both in it, like it or not." Outside, the wind picked up again. Snow swirled past the windows. And far in the distance, on the ridge, the riders had not moved. They were still watching. The knock came just after noon. 3 sharp raps on the wooden door. Firm, measured, like someone used to giving orders. Harold froze. His hands were still dusted with flour from the bread he had been trying to bake. He looked at Coda, who sat on the edge of the bed, already pale again. "Under the floor," Harold said quickly. Coda hesitated. "Now." The boy moved without a word. Harold lifted the wooden trapdoor beneath the rug and helped him climb down into the dark space below. It wasn't deep, just a shallow storage pit lined with old crates and dry roots. But it would have to do. "Don't make a sound," Harold whispered. He closed the trapdoor and pulled the rug back over it, just as another knock at the door, louder this time. Harold wiped his hands on a cloth and opened the door slowly. 3 men stood outside. All wore dark blue coats and stiff expressions. Their leader was a tall man with gray at his temples and a pistol on his belt. "Afternoon," the officer said. "Captain George Lyle, U.S. Cavalry." Harold nodded once. "Harold Cole, trapper. What brings you way out here?" "Looking for someone," the captain replied. His eyes slid past Harold into the cabin. A young native male. Escaped from custody near Fort Douglas 2 nights ago. Could be dangerous. Harold kept his voice calm. "I haven't seen anyone but squirrels in a week." One of the soldiers stepped forward and sniffed the air. "Smells like you've been cooking." "Trying," Harold said with a weak smile. Bread's been hard since I ran out of lard. Captain Lyle took a step closer. Mind if we look around? I do, actually, Harold replied. This is my home. Lyle narrowed his eyes. Mr. Cole, if you're hiding someone. I'm not. Then you won't mind us stepping inside. Harold hesitated. Then he stepped back, letting the soldiers enter. His heart pounded in his chest. They poked around the corners, opened cupboards, checked behind the bed. One soldier stomped the floor. Bit hollow over here, he said. That's the wood pile, Harold said quickly. Floor's thinner there. Captain Lyle walked slowly to the fireplace, looking at the half-burned logs. You live out here all alone? Always have. The captain's eyes locked on Harold's for a long moment. We'll be back, he said finally. And if you see anything or anyone, you'd best report it. Harboring enemies is a crime. I'm just a trapper, Captain, Harold said. I don't want trouble. Lyle nodded, but his look said he didn't believe it. The soldiers turned and rode off without another word. Harold closed the door, bolted it, and dropped to his knees. He lifted the trapdoor. Coda climbed out slowly, his eyes full of guilt. I will go, he said. They are after me. You should not suffer. Harold shook his head. No, you're not going anywhere. But I don't care. I found you in the snow, and I'm not letting you die now. Let them come. For the first time, Coda's eyes filled with tears. Outside, snow began to fall again, quiet, steady, and cold. Night came early, heavy with snow and silence. Harold sat by the fire, sharpening his knife. Coda lay on the bed, wrapped in blankets, still weak but stronger than the night before. Outside, the wind had quieted, but something strange began to rise through the trees. A sound, low at first, almost too soft to notice. Boom, boom, boom. It was a slow rhythm, deep and steady, like a heartbeat made of thunder. Harold paused. His hand tightened on the knife handle. You hear that? He asked. Coda's eyes were already open. He sat up slowly, head turned toward the sound. It is a warning, he said quietly. Harold frowned. A warning? From who? Not from men, Coda whispered. From the spirits. Harold sighed. I don't believe in ghost stories, kid. Coda didn't reply. He just listened, deeply, like he understood something Harold couldn't hear. The drum beats grew louder. Boom, boom, boom. Harold stood and moved to the window. The forest was black, broken only by the white of falling snow. Then he saw it. Flickers of orange light, moving between the trees. Not lightning, not reflections. Firelight, torches. Harold's blood ran cold. Someone's out there, he said. He grabbed his rifle, eyes scanning the woods. Coda didn't move. It is the Watchers, he said. My people. They have found me. Harold turned to him sharply. They're Blackfeet. Coda nodded. They have come to see who helped me. The firelight grew brighter. Figures moved just beyond the tree lean, silent shadows among the snow-covered pines. One figure stepped forward, alone. He wore a long fur robe and stood tall despite his age. His gray braids hung over his shoulders, and his face was lined with time. He carried no weapon. His eyes, sharp and steady, looked straight at the cabin. Harold stood frozen by the window. He's just standing there, he muttered. Not hiding, not moving, just watching. Coda got up slowly. That is Iron Elk. Who? My mother's uncle. A leader. A seer. Harold looked back toward the figure. Iron Elk stood motionless in the snow, as if waiting for something. What does he want? Harold asked. To see if kindness still lives among the white men, Coda replied. The drumming faded slowly, as if drawn back into the earth. The forest fell silent again, but the firelight remained. So did the figure in the trees. Harold lowered his rifle. He wasn't sure what he was seeing anymore. Ghost stories or not, something real had come out of the woods that night, and it had not come in anger. The morning light broke slow and pale over the frozen land. Smoke curled from Harold's chimney. Inside, the cabin was quiet, but the weight of the night still hung in the air. Coda sat near the fire, sipping warm broth. He looked stronger. His color had returned. His eyes were clear. Harold stood by the window, staring at the trees. He's still there, he said. Coda didn't need to look. He will come when it is time. As if on cue, there was movement outside. A single figure stepped out of the trees and walked slowly toward the cabin. Harold's grip tightened on his rifle, but Koda placed a hand on his arm. "Do not fear. He brings no harm." Harold nodded once and opened the door. The old man stopped a few feet from the porch. His face was calm. His steps were strong despite his age. His fur cloak brushed the snow as he walked. "I am Iron Elk," he said in clear, slow English. Harold stepped outside. "Harold Cole," he replied. "This is my land." "I know," the elder said, his eyes kind but sharp. "And yet you opened your home to a dying boy." Harold said nothing. Iron Elk looked past him into the cabin. "That boy is my blood. My sister's grandchild." Harold nodded. "I didn't know that." "You did not need to," Iron Elk said. "You saw a life worth saving. That was enough." There was a long pause. The snow crunched underfoot as the wind shifted. "I do not come to threaten you," the elder continued. "We are not raiders. Not anymore. We are cold, hungry. Our people die with each moon. And you live here alone, with failing traps and empty shelves." Harold's jaw clenched. Iron Elk took a step closer. "I offer something better than war," he said. "A trade. Our knowledge for your welcome." Harold raised an eyebrow. "We know this land," Iron Elk said. "Where the elk move. Where the ground sleeps with water below. How to plant late crops that can still grow before the deep frost. We teach you. You share warmth, shelter, tools. No fighting. No fire. Just survival for all." Harold looked at the man, searching his face. "And if I say no, then we leave," Iron Elk replied. "Quiet as snow. And in time, both our kinds may fade from this place. You from cold, us from hunger." Harold looked back at the cabin, at Koda watching from inside. Then he looked at the trees, so full of silence. He thought of the empty traps, of the bitter nights, of the boy's hand reaching for his shoulder in the dark. "I'll listen," he said, "but I make no promises." Iron Elk nodded slowly. A man who listens already walks halfway toward peace. And with that, the two men stood together in the cold. Not as enemies, not yet as friends, but as men trying to survive a winter that had no mercy for anyone. For 3 days, the snow did not fall. Harold walked the woods with Iron Elk while Koda rested at the cabin. The old man moved through the forest like part of it, silent, sure-footed, always watching. Harold followed, still unsure if he was making a mistake. "You see that tree?" Iron Elk asked, pointing to a twisted pine near a rocky slope. Harold nodded. "Beneath it runs deep water, slow, cold, and pure." Harold looked at the frozen ground. "How do you know?" Iron Elk knelt, scooped a handful of soil, and crumbled it between his fingers. "The earth speaks to those who pay attention." They walked farther. The elder stopped again and showed Harold how to read broken branches, faint tracks, and patterns in the snow. "Elk passed here before dawn," Iron Elk whispered. "4 bulls, 2 cows. They follow the wind. They drink from the south ridge." Harold listened, watched, learned. By evening, they returned to the cabin. Harold handed Iron Elk a tin box. "Dried herbs, pain powder, bandages. You'll need them." The elder took the items without pride or shame. "We do not beg, and you do not owe. This is how survival should look, shared." Inside, Koda sat near the fire, carving something from wood. His hands were steadier now. His cheeks held color again. "You two make a strange pair," Harold said. Koda smiled. "He never teaches anyone. You're the first white man he has not turned away." Harold sat down, poured himself coffee, and stared at the fire. "I still don't know if this is smart," he said. "If word gets out, they'll call it treason. They'll say I'm helping enemies." Iron Elk placed another log on the fire. "Then we do not let word get out." Harold looked up. "No army. No settlers. No one," Iron Elk said. "Only us. Quiet hands. Open minds. No noise. Just work." Harold thought of the cavalry, of Captain Lyle's eyes, of the trap under his floorboards where Koda had hidden. He thought of how quickly everything could fall apart if the wrong person asked the right question. Still, he looked at the elder and gave a slow nod. "We do it quiet. We help each other. But we tell no one." Iron Elk smiled just a little. "That is enough." That night, They shared a small meal and made plans to dig near the pine tree with twisted roots. Coda placed the carving he had been shaping in a Harold's hand. It was a bear, strong, silent, carved from dark wood. For strength, the boy said. Harold looked at it for a long moment, then nodded. Let's hope it works. Outside, the wind began to rise again, but for the first time in weeks, Harold did not feel alone against it. He had made an agreement, not with words on paper, but with hands, with trust, and with hope that the forest might still offer something back. By the end of the week, the first well was halfway dug. Harold had never seen anything like it. Iron Elk's men worked without shouting, without waste. Every swing of the shovel, every cut of the earth was careful and full of purpose. Coda helped where he could, carrying buckets, checking the tools, listening. He was still healing, but his spirit was strong. Then, one cold morning, a new sound came through the trees, wagon wheels on ice. Harold stepped outside and saw them. 3 wagons, 2 white families, one native group with ponies and a sled, faces pale with hunger, eyes filled with questions. A woman stepped down first, thin, wrapped in patchwork wool. Are the stories true? She asked. Did you find water? Harold looked past her at the others. A man with a limp, a child holding a shovel, a young Blackfeet woman clutching a newborn. We did, Harold said slowly. But this isn't a camp. It's not safe to stay here. We have nowhere else, another man said. Our farm froze. Our well's dry. We heard this was a place of peace. Iron Elk stepped from the cabin's side, his shadow long in the snow. One of the white men reached for his rifle. Easy, Harold said sharply. He's the one who showed me the water. Tension crackled in the air like fire in dry grass. One of the younger Apache warriors stepped forward, eyes locked on the settlers. The wind dropped. Hands hovered near weapons. Mouth stayed shut. Then, Coda stepped forward. His voice was clear and steady. Stop. All eyes turned to him. He stood tall, arms loose by his side. You came here because you were starving. You came because your children need food. So did we. No one spoke. Coda pointed to the frozen earth beneath their feet. This land has fed no one for months. Not white, not Blackfeet, not anyone. But now it breathes again, and it will only keep breathing if we let it. He looked to both sides. You want peace? Then prove it. The Apache warrior slowly lowered his hand from his knife. The white farmer with the rifle lowered his eyes. The moment passed. Iron Elk gave a quiet nod. Harold sighed with relief. Let them stay, he said. If they work, if they help, we'll find a way. And so the digging continued. White hands, native hands, cold hands working side by side. The well deepened. The earth softened. And the first true hope in months rose like steam from the snow. That night, they shared one fire. No speeches, no promises, just soup, silence, and the sound of breathing together. The snow began to melt slowly, like the loosening of an old memory. Patches of brown earth peeked through the white. Streams returned, soft and cold. Birds sang again from the trees. And in the wide field beside Harold's cabin, green began to grow. Women from the Blackfeet camp taught the settlers how to prepare the soil with care. Not fast, not deep, just right. They planted corn, squash, and beans in the old way. 3 sisters, they called them, growing together, helping each other rise. Harold watched as rows of life appeared where dead land had once ruled. He had never believed anything would grow again. Now, his land looked like it was waking up from a long, hard sleep. Coda stood beside him, stronger now. He held a small bag of seeds in his hand. They're like people, he said. Some grow fast, some take time, but they all need warmth. Harold smiled and nodded. They're in the right place then. Children ran between the rows, laughing. Some were Apache, some were white. None of them cared who was who. They chased chickens. They splashed in the stream. They lived like there had never been war. But not everyone had forgotten. One afternoon, dust rose on the road to the west. Harold stepped onto the porch. Captain George Lyle rode in with 4 soldiers. Their eyes were sharp, their coats stiff with dust. The captain dismounted slowly, boots crunching on gravel. Harold met him halfway. Captain, Mr. Cole, Lyle said. His eyes scanned the farm. He saw the families working together, the women hanging blankets in the sun, the men building new fences, the children playing near a half-finished well. His jaw tightened. "You've built quite a place here," he said. Harold didn't answer. The captain stepped forward, but a sound stopped him. Laughter. One of the children had slipped and landed in the mud. Another, Apache, offered a hand. They both fell again, giggling. Captain Law watched them in silence. He looked back at Harold. "I suppose it's not my place to break something that's working." "No, sir," Harold said quietly. "It's not." Lyle nodded once, then turned to his men. "Mount up." They left the way they came, slow, quiet, without a word of warning. Harold stood there for a long time. Coda joined him. "You think he'll be back?" "Maybe," Harold said. "But next time, he might bring a shovel instead of a gun." That night, under a soft sky and blooming trees, the fires burned low and steady. No one gave speeches. No one asked questions. But deep in the earth, life had returned. And above it, two peoples who once feared each other now sowed seeds in the same soil, hoping they would rise together. The fire crackled in the middle of the field, warm and bright under the evening sky. Around it, people sat on logs and stones, white and black feet, young and old, faces glowing in the orange light. Bowls passed from hand to hand. Laughter rose like smoke into the stars. Harold Cole sat quietly near the edge of the circle, a tin cup in his hand and a full plate in his lap. He watched it all in silence. A little girl he didn't know tugged on his coat and offered him a piece of sweetbread. He took it with a nod, and she ran off giggling. Coda sat beside him. "You are quiet tonight," he said. Harold smiled, just taking it all in. Coda looked at the fire. "You saved my life." "You would have done the same," Harold said. Coda turned to him with a grin. "Maybe, but I would have complained more." They both chuckled. Then Coda added gently, "You are my uncle now. That's what my family calls you." Harold blinked. His throat tightened, but he nodded. "Uncle Harold," Coda repeated with pride. Iron Elk approached from the fire's far side. He moved slowly, with the dignity of someone who had survived much and expected little. The others made space for him without being told. He stood in front of Harold, then reached into a small leather pouch at his waist. From it, he pulled a carved stone, smooth and dark, with markings etched carefully by hand. He held it out. "We have spoken," Iron Elk said, "and we have watched." Harold took the stone. "In our way," the elder continued, "you now have a name among us." Harold looked up, surprised. "A name?" Iron Elk nodded. "You are called Apache. What does it mean?" The elder looked at him with calm eyes. "It means heart without walls." The firelight danced across Harold's weathered face. For a moment, he had no words. Around them, people shared food. Settlers in Blackfeet told stories, handed out blankets, sang soft songs in two languages. There were no borders between them, just warmth, just hope. Harold looked down at the stone again, feeling its weight in his palm. Then he looked at the fire, then at the people, then up at the stars above this quiet land. And finally, he turned his gaze outward, to you. His voice came soft but clear. "Would you have helped the boy in the snow? Would you have carried him when you could barely carry yourself? Would you have shared your last meal with a stranger, not knowing what it might cost you? Because that's what it takes sometimes, not laws, not bullets. Just one small act of kindness when no one is watching." The screen fades to darkness, but the fire still burns in your memory. Jitsag du es mir. Was hattest du gitten? Hattest du geholfen, oder weggeschot? When Dyke dies gestic berut hat, Dan Schrabe unten in die Kommentar. Warst du stehen geblieben, oder weitergegangen? Lass ein like when du glaubst, das Menschlichkeit wichtiger ist als grens. Uni verges nicht zu abonnieren. Für mehr Geschichten, die Zagen was wirklich zalt.